King George II went to the first performance in London. And King George, you've got to understand the mentality of the day. It was a Christian nation. They believed in God. The church was paramount, and everything sort of revolved around that. And the king, even though King Charles I lost his head over this issue of the divine rule of kings, that God places the king in place and that's it, end of story, everybody obey him because he's my representative on earth. Even though the democracy and the parliament had said that whole modern nature had sort of grabbed hold in Britain, the king themselves still thought, no, I am the king, and I am here. I am a Christian, and I am the leader of the Christian church. In fact, even today, the Queen Elizabeth is the defender of the faith. You know. So George went to the first performance, which was a bit of a surprise because they'd invited him, but they weren't too sure whether he would come or not, because it wasn't like today when you have the royal schedule is planned a year in advance, and you know exactly what they're going to be doing at what time, and you're going to be here, and then there's none of that. If he wanted to go, he went. If he didn't want to go, he didn't go. He decided to go. And the royal box is always there, and every theater had a royal box. 99% of the time it wasn't used, but it was there with the flag draped and the whole thing. And then in the middle of the performance of the Hallelujah chorus, where it comes, the chorus says, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And the tradition is that at that point, King George stood, because in society at that time, everybody stood. When the monarch stood, everybody stood. Nobody sat in the presence of the king, and everybody had to stay standing until the king seated himself. Then once he was sitting, then everyone else could sit down, and so on. So then all of a sudden, in the middle of the performance, the king stands because he realizes he's sitting down, and the King of Kings, well, that's my king, and I have to stand in his presence. So he stood, and the minute he stood, everybody stands. And so that's the legend. That's the story. There are some people who say, no, he was just standing up to, he was going to go to the bathroom, and or stuff like that, and it just doesn't play out. No. The royals have very well trained bladders. They did then, they do now. They're not going to do that in the middle of a situation. So that's why he stood, and that's why it's tradition today that when the Hallelujah chorus starts, everybody stands. And it goes back to that one instance.